Namibia, colleagues, DGs, and CEOs of different broadcast media across the continent, especially those drawn from Sabah region, CEO of Broadcast Media Africa, my friend Mr. Benjamin. Good morning, all. I'm honored to welcome you to Kigali, Rwanda, for the important conference, where we take stock of challenges and progress made as we embark on this ambitious journey of transforming our broadcast entities into fully fledged digital networks. I wish to extend special gratitude to Sabah and Broadcast Media Africa for partnering with us at RBA. I also thank through our government spokesperson for the conference. Delegates, the broadcasting landscape is quickly changing. If we do not change with time, we may be left far behind. As we all know, it took almost 38 years for the radio to reach an audience of 50 million in the world. For television, it was only 13 years, while it only took 4 years for the internet to reach its audiences. What does this mean? It means that with advancements in the digital space, the future of broadcasting shows that resilience will come from making creativity and innovation at the heart of what we do. And as audiences demand, as the demands of the audience keep changing, the future shows that linear broadcasting will soon become a platform of the past. Our continent, the African continent, cannot afford to lag behind. Our industry turns to operate within the much-voted digital ecosystem. We must leverage the dynamics of this new digital environment and, of course, use it to deliver enhanced value to our citizens who deserve quality content just like the rest of the world. I'll share with you a few statistics that we need to ponder on as we embark on this conference. Number one, the value of online video platform industry is expected to grow 9% from 2021 to 2028, on an annual average of 9% growth. By 2027, live streaming industry is forecast to be worth 250 billion. Live streaming events increased 300% in the past 6 months of the pandemic. Over 3/4 of internet users watch online video content every week. Linear TV watching has reduced on average 3 hours. That was almost 4 years ago. I'm sure now it's now 2 hours a day. On average, only 2 hours people spend watching us on the screen. The rest is spent on smart digits. Smart gadgets. Therefore, in light of the above, and as we embark to brainstorm on the journey, we must ask ourselves, what role are we playing in this space? We need to share experiences and expertise so that those that are on the right path become role models for colleagues that are still struggling. We need to ensure that our governments understand this ambitious transformation and are able to provide resources needed to fund the transformational process. We need to start thinking how our networks can become content aggregators. The future belongs to those that will be adaptive to this new trend, and the creativity in all spheres will be the driving force. Once again, I wish to welcome you to Kigali and hope and pray that you enjoy your stay here. Please take time off your heavy schedule to visit Kigali. There's a lot that Kigali offers beyond these conference facilities. I can assure you of your security. Make time to enjoy the nightlife of our city. Before concluding, I wish to recognize participants that are with us today. I'll just mention a country and just raise up and we see you. I start with our friends from Angola. Okay, they seem to be not yet in the room. I think they came in this morning. Do you have, no, Botswana, I know Botswana. Botswana, DG Botswana, I've not seen him. Botswana? Please stand up for recognition, yes. Botswana. Malawi? Stand up for recognition, please. Most welcome. Mozambique? Most welcome, Mozambique. South Africa? Namibia, the big boys? Most welcome. Tanzania? My brothers from Nigeria. And sisters from Nigeria. Good to have you. Ghana. Seychelles. I know the DG is on his way. He must be on his way here. He came late in the night. Zambia. The mighty Zimbabwe. Zim. Is my colleague, I think he must be on his way here also, AUB, the AUB CEO, Gregoire, he must be on his way. And of course the USA, our partners from the USA. I hope I have not forgotten any country. But Uganda? Huh? Lesotho. Please, apologies. I know there's also Mali. Mali. Kenya. I know Job, my friend Job, is representing Uganda. You can also stand up for recognition. Uganda. So, Sudan. I don't want to leave anyone out. So everybody is recognized. You saved the best for last. And of course, Rwanda, the hosts. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you fruitful discussions. I hope that you do enjoy your stay in Kigali. And should you want anything to make sure that you're comfortable, please, we're here at your service. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, Director General of Rwanda Broadcasting Agency, Arthur Asimwe. Like we heard, the different beautiful countries that are convened here in this hall. It is a possibility that you might have entered here as strangers, so I am hoping that you make friendship and even better connections and colleagues. So thank you very much for convening here once again. So without further ado, I would like to welcome the publisher and CEO of Broadcast Media Africa, Benjamin Pius. Welcome.
Thank you, Martina. Good morning. Okay. I think I feel what you feel when you were here. And I'm going to welcome all of you by saying good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. My name is Pius, Benjamin Pius, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Broadcast Media Africa. How many of us here do not know Broadcast Media Africa? Awesome. Can we please give ourselves a rousing round of applause, please? Thank you. We are delighted to be here. And first of all, I want to give wonderful acknowledgement to the man that's just left this podium, Arthur Asimwe, a very good friend of mine. And, you know, November last year, I think, it was October last year in Cape Town, we were having this meeting, the SABA annual general meeting and the convention. And Arthur, well, we were just coming out of COVID, right? And Arthur was one of the speakers. And I was running the panel where he was running, and I just threw it out there. I said, Arthur, how about we come to Kigali next year and you can host us? I thought he's going to say, as the DGs and CEOs always say, Benjamin, let me think about it. I will put it under advisement, and I will come back to you, or my people will come back to your people. Well, you know what? Right there, the man said, yes, guys, come to Kigali, we will host you. Please, ladies and gentlemen, Otto, if you can stand up, please, I need you to appreciate Otto Asimwe, DG of Rwanda Broadcasting Agency, please, for that. For that, we are here today. We are here, we've gathered together all, as you can see, all the broadcasters, or most of the broadcasters, leaders from the region, who basically are coming here to discuss important issues that affect our continent when it comes to broadcasting and digital media, audiovisuals. I always argue when we have these meetings, I always argue, and you guys know it, that the mind of our people is controlled by what we do as broadcasters. That is why we are in a special position to either send this continent up where it should belong, or keep it down and not in the committee of nations that we need it to be. It is our job, it is your job as broadcasters to fashion a way to make sure that that becomes a reality. That is why I am delighted that we have managed to bring you guys together. Over the course of the couple of days, you will be having deliberations, you will be having conversations, and you will be able to decide a way forward. The good thing about what we do at Broadcast Media Africa is when we bring you guys together, we make sure, we take pain to make sure that the guys that are in this room are actually the guys that represent Africa. When we go to when we have other events, we see people coming from Europe, coming from Asia, coming from America, to come and talk about broadcasting as it affects Africans. No African or little African in the room. We said no. Broadcast Media Africa is only going to focus on Africa. We're going to make sure that the practitioners know what is happening in our industry, in this continent. And we're going to make sure that people outside Africa sees what's happening in the broadcasting media sector in Africa by what we put out there. And that is what we have been doing. So if you're here today and you are still not a member of the Broadcast Media Africa professional networks of about 20,000 odd people right now, it's free, please join. And you will be able to have access to all these resources and information, and you'll be able to participate further in things like this. Enough about Broadcast Media Africa. Let's talk about what we have packaged for you guys for the next couple of days. So we have arranged for the best of the best to come and do presentations. And we're going to have wonderful panels, which, to my mind, is almost the most interesting thing that I find in this Congress, where we have key leaders discussing issues that affect us. I sincerely hope that you enjoy it. And my job will be done as the co-convener of this meeting if, at the end of the next couple of days, you said, wow, that seems like a fantastic event to have attended. I will not leave this post without giving thanks. Thanks to the president of SABA, my big brother, Stanley Benjamin Similo. I mean, we've been doing this with SABA now for 6 years, maybe a little bit more, since 2014. And when Mr. Similo, also the DG of the Namibia Broadcasting Corporation, if he had said to us that, guys, I don't believe in this, let's forget about it, we would not be here today. So, Oga, thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it. Can we please appreciate Mr. Benjamin Similo? And also, I do not want to leave here without saying thanks to our industry partners that have supported us today. Without you guys helping out, giving us information, giving us financial support, we would not be able to gather people together here. People have come from far and wide in Africa. Apart from the immense contribution that's been made by our host, RBA, there are other companies as well. I have to mention them. I have Centec, I have AFP, I have France 24, Liquid Technologies, and Eutelsat, and also we have industry partners like the Association of Ethiopian Broadcasters. All of you have assisted us one way or the other to make sure that this event is properly packaged and well presented. The team is here from BMA, the team is here from Saba, and of course the team is here from the host RBA. If any of you need anything whatsoever to make your presence here a lot more convenient and comfortable, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and all the team. I wish you fruitful deliberation. Thank you. You're welcome. God bless you, and God bless Rwanda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pius, for letting us know about the different ways in which, throughout the course of the 2 days, we will learn more about promoting the values and enriching lives through digital broadcasting. Now, I would like to invite the next speaker. He is the president of Saba, Mr. Stanley B. Similo. Now, before we welcome him, a little birdie told me that this is his birthday. Today is his birthday. So I would like all of you to help me wish him a very happy birthday as he takes the stage today. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. A very happy birthday to you. You're welcome.
Yes, on birthdays, kids must ask what they want. So I'm not too sure now whether I'm entitled to that, because if you look at the clock, it has moved, and it's moving rapidly. With that said, Madam of Proceedings, thank you very much. Meme Makolo, thank you also for making time for us. And of course, Arthur, like my namesake Benjamin has said, it's great for us to be here, really great. And then to all our CEOs, DGs, you're very, very welcome. And the partners that are all here, especially the technical support that is believing in Saba, we are indebted. Most probably there's no value to that. And maybe let me just quickly touch on Saba. Saba is one of the blocks on the continent which resides within SADC. But we are here today because our definition of who we are is that of being African. Because it wouldn't matter where you reside on the continent. There's one common theme, there's one common thread that defines us, and that is being African. We are also hoping by being here that we will extend an element of saying, how do we harness what we do, irrespective of region where we come from. And part of what we've been able to do within the context of Saba is now to run a news bulletin that is dedicated to stories being told by African broadcasters in the way that they want them known. That narrative is no longer determined by others who will define us for whatever they would believe we should be. Hence, the invite to all others that are here that are not traditionally part of Saba is to say, from a programs exchange perspective, we believe that the common ground is there. Let's get into that. Let's try and share that as well. Yes, today we talk about the digital divide. We speak about the OTTs. We speak about the beauty that technology today offers. Certain fundamentals, if they are not in place, this may remain a pipe dream for many. Because within our own settings where we are operating from, until such time that broadband is readily available and affordable for that matter, aspects of logging online will remain a challenge. And we also know that the moment you bring connectivity to a village, that's normally the beginning of an economic activity. What more if people can hear and see what we are doing as broadcasters? It means then they are deprived of knowing what is happening. So our role, apart from talking about the nice and the great things, is also to reflect on the challenges that we may be facing throughout the continent as well. Hence, I concur with Arthur when he said that part of what we need to do is to make sure that we also inform our principals, the political leadership of our respective countries, to support us financially so that we can make these dreams come true. Because in the life of a public broadcaster, access to funding is not that simple. If the need is there to decide what becomes important, we sometimes also get pushed to the other side of the waiting list. But be that as it may, we have managed to find creative ways of still getting the signals to go to where we believe it should be. Now, I arrived here Sunday morning at about 3 in the morning. So I slept the greater part of Sunday. And then in the afternoon, I was walking around more so closer to the hotel. And then I was saying, but it's nice, but I want to see Rwanda. And I think yesterday, I saw Rwanda. Because I went to Nyamirambo. Immediately when I got there, I knew I was home. I knew I was home because that's where I saw the reflection that speaks to me. Just being me, forget about titles and things. Peaceful people, enjoying life. And that experience alone, I was telling a colleague yesterday, it was about 3-4 hours, almost equaled 14 days of being around here, just by virtue of that interaction. With that, I'm saying thank you very much for the hospitality that we've been enjoying so far. The Saba Secretariat, in tandem with Mr. Pugh's organization, have been working tirelessly to make sure that the next 2.5 days will be days that will work for us. And we really need to leave here knowing that we will be effecting and impacting change in such a way that as brothers and sisters across the continent and even beyond, that we can foster links that will make sure that the aspect of telling our stories is that thing that we would want to be. And with that said, I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the President of Saba and Director General of Namibia Broadcasting Corporation, Mr. Stanley Benjamin Similo, for your remarks. Rwanda is definitely beautiful, and we really hope that you, together with the rest of the delegates, will be able to experience that throughout the course of the next few days. So I would like to welcome on stage the guest of honor today, the government spokesperson, Yolande Makolo. Thank you very much.
The President of the Southern Africa Broadcasting Association, CEOs, Directors General of Broadcast Media Outlets, industry executives, distinguished delegates, Muramteneza. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the government of Rwanda, I am delighted to welcome you all to Kigali for this convention on broadcast and digital media. I want to start by thanking the co-conveners, BMA and Saba, and also our host, RBA, and all the partners. Thank you for bringing us together. This is unusual for me. Usually when I'm engaged with broadcasters, I'm dealing with your journalists in a very different kind of lively engagement. So this is, for a change, this is nice. So we know that the digital sector depends on robust ICT infrastructure. And as Stanley said earlier, it's critical that broadcasters partner closely with their governments and regulators so that together we can continuously improve the sector, innovate, and give the best quality service to your customers and our citizens. Here in Rwanda, we continue to make decent progress in the rollout of ICT infrastructure across the country. This is because we want to see more Rwandans, especially talented young people, seize the prospects that digital technology presents. This talent and drive is universal, but we need to continue to work together to make sure that it is matched by opportunities, real opportunities, so that young Africans can show us what they can do, how far they can take this continent. As we speak today, a few kilometers away, on another one of our 1,000 hills in Kigali, the GSMA Mobile World Congress is taking place. It's being officially opened by our president, His Excellency Paul Kagame. And this, the MWC is taking place for the first time on the African continent. This global gathering will provide space for African innovators to showcase their potential for creating homegrown innovations, including digital content. Allow me to quote President Paul Kagame from his address to the East African Community Media Summit a few years ago. He said, "For far too long, the international media, with its own objectives and interests, has dominated the region and set the news agenda. This often means that they tell our story from their perspective, at best, and at worst, distort it altogether. As has become all too evident in our region, such misrepresentation derails our progress or even fuels conflict and other problems that jeopardize the gains that we have made. So we really cannot afford to be silent accomplices to agendas that undermine African aspirations and progress. The executives here at this conference have the power and the platforms to ensure that our diverse African voices continue to be heard, and heard loudly, both here on the continent and beyond. Allow me to share my small experience of African broadcasting and how it impacted my childhood and ultimately contributed to my being invited to speak to you today. I happen to have grown up in a great country nearby called Kenya. Karibu sana to our friends from Kenya. Back then, we lived on VOK. VOK is Voice of Kenya, the national public TV and radio. I remember very well the high-quality programming from the nightly newscasts in English and Swahili, to the comedy shows, to the creative TV advertisements that I can still quote and sing the jingles to this day. And importantly, most of the products and services that were being advertised on VOK back then were locally produced. That's not something small. This is in the 70s and the 80s. I also very fondly remember what was then called UTNA, Union of African Radio and Television Organization. I don't know how many of you remember that. I'm betraying my age here. Through UTNA, we were able to enjoy a range of programming from the rest of Africa. I think it's now called the African Union of Broadcasting. Yeah. So why is this important? Essentially, our generation grew up seeing ourselves, our values, our stories reflected by the talented Africans on our TV screens and on our radios. We were hearing ourselves reflected on these platforms. So the power of this kind of representation and validation to build confidence and contribute to identity, social cohesion, and a sense of Pan-Africanism cannot be underestimated. And these were the days of analog. So today, we're struggling to get our urban children to, first of all, find, let alone engage with, Rwandan and African content. There is so much competition for their attention on all platforms from all over the world. It's not a bad thing. But, we're struggling for balance. And also, our rural populations, what kind of options do they have in terms of content and platforms? I hope this will be among the issues that will be reflected upon in the next few days. I also trust that you will help plot the way forward on how we can ensure that the infrastructure, the expensive infrastructure that we're rolling out under DTT enriches our communities and contributes to Africa's development. So let me conclude by, once again, thanking Stanley and Saba for choosing to hold your annual General Assembly in Kigali. We're honored to host you here. Thank you very much for inviting me to join you. For those who will have some free time, as Arthur said, please do explore Kigali, go to Nyamirambo and other places. Arthur will tell you where to go. He knows these places very well. But also venture out outside Kigali, see what the rest of what Rwanda has to offer. On that note, I am honored to declare this conference open, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, the guest of honor, Yvonne Makolo, for sharing with us the importance of broadcast media personally to you and the importance of it in general. So many enriching statements were said today, but one of the things that I personally took is that depriving the people of knowing is simply no way to go, and that is something that we need to take to heart. So we would like to take some memorable pictures. So if I would kindly ask the CEOs, the Director Generals, the guest of honor, to kindly step forward for a group photo so that we can be able to take this and remember them from the days to come. So you're welcome. Don't be shy. Step forward, please.
All right, thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. I will take over from Martina for a few minutes to give her a breather, just to go through what we're going to be doing now. So we're going to break off for a short break, literally 20 minutes break, for refreshments and also for meet and greet networking. When we come back, we're going to go into the plenary session. We're going to have the first presentation from the Department of Communications and Digital Services in South Africa. Tombi, I hope you guys are here. Okay, they're here. So after that, we'll do the regulatory panel. After the regulatory panel, we'll then have a keynote session on OTT streaming. I'm just running through the agenda. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have it, but just to run through. And after that, we will do another panel on public service broadcasting, providing the services, getting from A to Z. We go for lunch and more networking. Then we will come back and listen to the presentation on infrastructure delivery from Centec. And we do a panel as well. The panel will be looking on the most important issue to my mind, which is local content. What are we doing about it? And then we'll round off the day with another panel, which is focused on radio. TV always takes the sexy bit of broadcasting, and radio gets not to be well mentioned. It's like the little sister or little brother. No, we're not going to make sure. We're going to make sure that that is redressed. So we're going to focus on radio, on a panel on radio. And then that will be it for the session for today. But that won't be it for the activity for the day, because in the evening, our host will be hosting us to evening cocktail reception. I will give you more detail about that before we close, or Martina will do that. But please be prepared to enjoy what we have on offer today. And also in the evening, I think the cocktail will start from around about 1900 hours, 7 p.m. So we are here. We are eager to get the day going. So we go for the break, and we will come back. What's the time check? Should we come back at 11 o'clock? 11 o'clock? Yep. See you at 11 o'clock. Have a good one. Thanks, guys.
interesting and very insightful things this next session. So without taking much of your time, I would like to invite the next speaker, and she's also going to be giving out a presentation. So this is Nombi Makwetu, who is currently the Acting Chief Director of Broadcasting Policy and Creative Industries, South African National Department of Communication and Digital Technologies. And she was also a panelist at Gardner Yearly IT Symposium at Cape Town Convention and so much more. She has so many achievements, and I would like to welcome her on stage. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Program Director, allow me to say protocol observed because I don't want to offend anyone. Let me start by saying we just want to extend our gratitude to Broadcast Media Africa for inviting us to be part of this convention. As it was indicated, my name is Ntombi Makwetu. I am from the National Department of Communications and Digital Technologies in South Africa. Can I please have my slides? Oh. Thank you very much. What I'm going to share with you this morning is just 2 programs that we've done as a country. The Cultural and Creative Industries Master Plan, as well as the Audio and Audiovisual Content Services Policy that we've done as the Department of Communications. So that is just a disclaimer. So when it comes to the Creative Industries Master Plan, it is really not a policy document. It is actually an implementation plan. As we all know that COVID-19 had negative impact, especially on the creative industries. So as the government of South Africa, we looked at various plans in various sectors, and cultural and creative industries was one of those. And the departments that were leading the development of the Creative Industries Master Plan was our department, Communications and Digital Technologies, Sports, Arts and Culture, Trade and Industry and Competition, Small Business Development, as well as tourism, given the role of creative industries in the tourism sector. So what we had envisioned for the master plan was really to make sure that it is indeed globally competitive, it's innovative, it's sustainable and vibrant, as I've indicated, the negative impact of COVID-19. Now, when it comes to the mission of the plan, how we have developed it, it was not only government, it was a combination of stakeholders from private sector, civil society, labor, because we wanted to make sure that it is indeed a social compact, so that when it comes to implementation, all partners are able to contribute and commit in terms of what they will be able to do to support the industry. So the purpose of the master plan is really to set out the interventions that aim to facilitate sustain wealth and income creation, the quality of jobs. As a country, we have a challenge of unemployment. So creative industries is actually seen as one of those sectors that can create employment in the country. We also wanted to make sure that we're coming up with an accelerated plan that can support the creative industry post-COVID-19. Pardon me, I'll have to look into the screen because the words are quite small. So we've actually identified the 3 main areas in the development of the plan, but overarching was the issue of transformation. So we looked at the supply side, we looked at the market efficiency, demand side. So when it comes to the supply side, we looked at the skills that are required for the creative industries to grow. We looked at competitiveness, not just locally, but also global competitiveness. We also looked at investment to make sure that there is indeed local and foreign direct investment, access to inputs and finance. When it comes to inputs, we're talking issues around infrastructure, development of intellectual property, and stimulate innovation. As you all know here, that the issue around IP is quite crucial and critical to sustain the creative industries. And in terms of the production infrastructure, as a country, we have community arts centers where creatives can be able to generate content. We have incubators, we have innovation hubs, we have sector economic zones. We also have accelerators. So when it comes to market efficiency, we're actually looking at a conducive environment where creative individuals and enterprises can thrive. So we're looking at smart government, coordinated efforts across the 3 spheres of government, being the local, provincial, and national government, including the private sector for that matter. We also looked at institutional framework. As I said, when we were developing the master plan, we wanted to make sure that it is indeed a compact that is comprised of various stakeholders. We're also looking at building a world-class clusters. For instance, we've got treaties that we've signed with various countries, so we wanted to make sure that we also leverage from those. Of course, ICT infrastructure, and I think it's a point that was indicated here by one of the speakers to say access to broadband is quite critical as we're moving to the digital environment and content is being accessed online. The protection of IP, as I've indicated, that is quite critical in terms of making sure that we sustain the industry. When it comes to the demand side, I do want to share with you that one of the complaints that was raised with one of the stakeholders in the development of the plan was the lack of participation from the broadcasters. Because, as you would understand, it's of no use for you to create content and then you don't have a market where you can be able to distribute your content. So in terms of the demand infrastructure, once again, community arts centers, tourism-linked distribution sites, hubs, clusters, venues, digital platforms, of course, mobile libraries, rural distribution and access. When it comes to some of the exhibitors, we're looking at student cards, pension cards, facilitation of market access, branding, export development, as I said, the international treaties that we have as a country, trade missions, exhibitions and fairs, corporate gifts and broadcasting, and obviously the exploitation of the intellectual property. We then identified broad key action plans of the master plan. One being improving access to finance and investment. And I'm sure you would all know, and I think one of the speakers have indicated here that the issue around funding, especially public broadcasters, it has become a challenge in most of the African countries. The second KPA is product development and innovation support. We're quite keen as a country to make sure that we support innovation, especially within the area of broadcasting and audiovisual. The second one, once again, is manufacturing and access to technology, and I think it's a point that has been emphasized here earlier. And the third one is domestic and international market access development, and I think it's a point that I've already alluded to make sure that we do make sure that the industry have access to domestic and international market. The fourth one is effective and efficient IP rights management. I do want to share with you that as government, we are reviewing our intellectual property legislation. The last one we had was in 1978. Given the new developments that are happening in the industry, we had to make sure that we are able to update our legislation. As I'm speaking to you now is before our portfolio committee that deals with issues of competition and intellectual property. And KAP number 5, once again, is the IP, creative, technical, and enterprise skills development. And I think for me, that's quite important. As we are moving to the digital environment, it's very important that the creatives have the relevant and the requisite skills to generate content in different formats so that it is able to transcend different markets around the world. And the sixth one is support for research and industry coordination, and this is quite key as well. The seventh one is transformation. Given the history that we have as a country in South Africa, we feel that one of the main objectives that we need to make sure that we deliver on is transformation, making sure that the creative industries and audiovisual broadly, it is transformed. Support for research, once again, and data collection. And the last one is policy and legislative coherence and implementation. As I've indicated, in South Africa, we have about 4 government departments that are responsible for creative industries, being our department, as I've indicated, sports, arts and culture, trade and industry and competition, as well as small business. I do want to share with you that when it comes to the South African government, there's been quite a lot of support towards the creative industries industry. And we have what we call a national industry framework, as well as industry policy action plan. And in those plans, 2 of the industries that are relevant to you, being film and television, have been supported quite heavily by government. The audiovisual and interactive media sector has also been one of the key focus areas in terms of making sure that there's incentive programs. And those are just in terms of the funding that government has provided in supporting the audiovisual and broadcasting and television. So with regards to the master plan itself, it's got 4 subsectors. One of those 4 subsectors, which I think is quite relevant for this convention, is the interactive media. So audiovisual and interactive media subsector. And the focus within that subsector is really to make sure that we create an enabling legislative and regulatory and policy environment. We also have to make sure that we improve access to finance and encourage investment, and as well as coming up with incentives in terms of making sure that we create local content and production and increase demand for local and global marketing, as I've indicated earlier. But the issue of distribution is quite key and critical when it comes to audiovisual and interactive media. As I said earlier, the issue around improving skills for the industry is quite key. As I've indicated now, I'm going to zoom into the policy that my department is specifically responsible for, which is the draft white paper on audio and audiovisual content services. And really the key objective of that policy is to make sure that we bring video on-demand services and video sharing platforms under a regulatory framework. As you would understand, especially if you look at the European Union, most of the members are now implementing what is called an Audiovisual Media Services Directive. They are transposing it in different countries, and that's what we are trying to do as a country as well, given the fact that on our shores, we now have over-the-top services, video sharing platform services, and in my country, the broadcasting industry is heavily regulated. So we had to make sure that we create a level playing field to make sure that these new services are also regulated and are able to contribute to the industry. As I've indicated, with this white paper, we trying to create a new policy environment where the sector can grow in a manner that will ensure access to broadcasting services by all citizens in my country, especially people with disabilities. We're quite passionate as government to make sure that people with disabilities are catered for. We're also looking at creating certainty and stability by improving regulatory capacity. As you would know, as an investor, you cannot go into a market where there's no certainty in terms of regulation. We're also trying to make sure that we facilitate competition and allow market entry by new entrants. More importantly, strengthen the public broadcaster, which is the South African Broadcasting Corporation. So in the main, the rationale for this policy, we also want to make sure that we align our policies, regulations, and legislation within the 4th Industrial Revolution. And we're also trying to make sure that we modernize our broadcasting landscape. As I indicated, our main intention is to make sure that we bring your video on-demand services, video sharing platform services, under a regulatory framework, and we make sure that we promote South African content. Those are just some of the principles that underpins this white paper. I'm not going to go to each and every one of them, but those are just some of those principles that this white paper is based on. As I've indicated, what we're trying to do with this white paper is to come up with a license framework and threshold for the audio and audiovisual content services. So in my country, we've got 2 licensing frameworks that we have. Individual licensing, which is mainly your commercial licensees, as well as class license, which community broadcasters fall under, is either radio or television community broadcasters. We're also looking at making sure that we prepare our public broadcaster within the new policy framework. And when it comes to the public broadcaster, as a department, we are embarking on a separate process that is mainly focusing on our public broadcaster. It's a legislation that's focusing on the SABC itself. So that legislation is looking at issues of governance, is looking at making sure that SABC is sustainable, is also commercial. As I've indicated, there are competitors that are currently competing with our public broadcasters, the OTT services. So we have to make sure that we support our public broadcaster so that it is able to compete with these new players. So when it comes to content regulation of the audio and audiovisual content services, the issues that we are looking into under that chapter are issues, and I think I'm preaching to the converted here, issues of discoverability, findability, issues of mass carry. For instance, in my country, we have a regulation that talks to the fact that the subscription broadcaster has to make sure that it carries the public channels. So that's a mass carry. However, what we've found is that the commercial or subscription broadcaster was actually, gaining benefit out of carrying the public channels. So what we are proposing in this policy is to allow the SABC to get into commercial agreements with whatever that would carry their public channels. But in principle, we have to make sure that the public channels are also carried by the subscription broadcasters. The issue around findability and discoverability, public interest content is very important to us as a country. To say, if you are an audio and audiovisual content service in whatever platform that you use, or you disseminate your content, you have to make sure that public interest content is easy to find and it is easy to discover. When it comes to support of domestic audio and audiovisual production, creative industries, issues around protection of copyright, IP and ownership, the issue around digital piracy I think it's a global challenge, but as a country, we are dealing with it with other relevant government departments. But we feel that it's quite critical that we protect copyright, given the fact that if you look at, for an example, sports rights, they're quite expensive. You can imagine if you invest in sports rights and acquire sports rights, and you have a piracy somewhere that's actually broadcasting a sports event, you might have lost as an investor. So those are some of the things that we're looking into. Developing human capital, digital skills, and digital media literacy. As I've indicated, when I was doing the Creative Industries Master Plan, the issue around developing human capital is quite key. As we're all moving into the digital environment, we have to make sure that we've got the relevant skills that are able to develop content. I mean, if you look at the creative industry space, you look at technologies such as artificial intelligence, the blockchain, the whole lot of technologies that are coming to our space. If we don't have the necessary skills that are able to actually get into making use of those skills, we will actually be left behind. And in terms of the digital media literacy, it's one of the issues that we're quite passionate as a country, given the misinformation and making sure that citizens are able to understand how to differentiate between information that is true and information that is false. So those are just some of the issues that the white paper deals with. So at a very high level, I've just touched into some of the issues that those chapters are dealing with. So thank you very much, Program Director. I think I would not have done justice if I leave the stage without saying what I've noticed. If you look at the program, there's only 9 women that are actually in the program, and the rest is men. So I think the organizers can do better next time. Thank you very much.
Yes, we will do better next time. Mr. President, I think from what I gather, the next Saba Convention, if this is correct, will take place in Tanzania next year, correct? Fantastic. And I can assure you, and also my DG is here, we will make sure that it's 60-40, women to men, okay? If we can find them, we will find them. No, thank you very much, Lady Ntobi. Can we please appreciate the lady again? As always, we have 2 options here. We can go straight to the panel. The reason why I ask her to sit is because she's also going to be joining the panel. But before that, we normally want to see if there is any outstanding questions for the lady that have just made the presentation, because she's delivered what I believe is an insightful presentation into what the South African agency is doing to make sure that the framework is in place to espouse and expound the digital creative that had to come here is to share with you guys so that we can take it to our different jurisdiction and see what we can borrow, we can use from that. So I think what we'll actually do is I will get the panel going, and if there are any outstanding questions, we'll take it with the panel if you don't mind. All right, thank you very much. So without much ado then, can we go into the next panel? The panel will be focused on regulatory issues. And every time I do this type of panel, I like to remind broadcasters that whilst we are talking about regulatory issues, and the guys that are going to be here will have the regulatory slant. As broadcasters, the regulators are one of the key principles of our industry. If we don't have a good relationship, or if the regulators are not getting things right, the job that we are doing as broadcasters cannot function. So it's always important to know that, and when we are talking about regulatory issues, we want to involve you guys as well, and I will be sure to make sure that this is as interactive as possible, and also pick on broadcasters. I always do that, so I'm sure you will forgive me if I pick on you to have your thoughts about what we are talking about as broadcasters and as well as regulators. So without much ado, can I bring in to the stage Elvis Besa. Elvis is going to be representing the Independent Broadcasting Authority of Zambia. Elvis is also representing one of the board members of SABA, Madam Joseph Mapoma, the DG of IBA, who will not be here today because of other engagement, but Elvis will do as much as a good job. Can we please welcome Elvis? And the other panelist that I have is also from the same place as Madam Tombi Makwetu, Tapelo Mokwana. Tapelo, please, if you join us. What we'll do, yes, please, can we appreciate Tapelo? What we'll do is we want to talk about regulatory reforms that are required. every time we gather together and we are talking about regulatory issues, and I was talking to Elvis backstage, and I said to him, is this a question of regulatory incapability or what? He says to me that no, it's not incapable. The regulators are not incapable. It's just a level of inadequacies is quite much. So we want to go into that. We want to go into what inadequacies exists. So we will look at it from the point of view of the regulator, and I would also like to hear from the broadcasters to tell us what they think that the issues are with regulating the broadcasting industry. Now, bear in mind that the broadcasting industry, I think it was my senior bro, AA Arthur Asimwe, that mentioned it. The broadcasting industry is changing. It's changing right before our eyes. He gave us ideas about how long it took radio to catch up, how long it took TV to catch up. Now, if we are sitting here thinking, okay, we are broadcasters, we should not have anything to do about the new media that is ongoing, the streaming platforms, the YouTubes, the Google, and all these other platforms, then maybe we haven't woken up to reality yet. Now, how does the regulation of these new media impact the regulation of what we do? Convergence. How do they all come together? Those are the things we will be delving into. I believe the mics are working, so I want to start with you guys from the far end, Topelo. What I want you to do is basically, the format will be you talk a little bit more about yourself, about what you do within the industry, and just give me a context about what we are talking about here. I believe you have some ideas that you want to share with us as well. Give me a context about what we're talking about here, and then we'll come all the way to Ntombi, and then from there we'll start the conversation going.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Program Director, for this opportunity for us to come and share our ideas as well as to contribute on this fundamental topic of the enhancing the regulatory capabilities within the new digital era. So one of the main functions of the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies is to create an enabling environment and policy environment to enable the regulators within that space to fulfill the mandates. And one of the key critical measures that we implement to allow and work together with regulators as a department is we have a strategic oversight model, which is which is the function or branch within that I'm responsible for. We have a model that encompasses critically 3 elements, and the first one is we work with them together in the strategic planning to see and as to how are they going to regulate the sector in line with new developments and industry trends, to see that their planning, is it aligned with the effective regulation goals which need to be achieved, and through that, because as required in terms of the legislation and certain regulations, the strategic plans and annual performance plans of the regulators are approved by the department. So we have that collaborative alignment that we engage with. And the second point is really on the governance element, to see whether the governance structures within the regulators are fit for purpose, to ensure that they are also agile with what the market or how the industry is moving. And through that, we facilitate the appointment of the boards and facilitating the building of the governance strength as well as assess the status of the governance. And the last one is mainly on the policy implementation support that we provide. We have recently formed what we call a digital reform forum, where we have the set of the 3 regulators, which is ICASA, that is responsible for regulating telecoms and broadcasting, as well as the .ZETNA, which is responsible for regulating the domain internet space in the country, as well as the Film and Publications Board, which its mandate has now been recently expanded into a fully fledged regulator that will focus not only on classification of content that they were previously responsible for. They are now mandated to regulate and issue licenses for all digital distributors within the sector in the country. And this comes at a time when many governments are grappling with the escalation of digital media activity, and it's notwithstanding the positive impact that these kinds of activities have yielded for our economies and towards economic growth, but also there are great risks that are associated with the escalation in online activity, and the FPB plays a critical role in protecting all citizens against the potential online harms or hate speech or prohibited content that may incite violence, that may incite propaganda for war. They are specifically responsible for ensuring that that is protected and regulating that space. So the Digital Regulatory Forum sits, and it's a platform where the regulators will sit and share knowledge and research on how best it is that they can respond to the sector. And that is one of the platforms that has really assisted in establishing the capabilities within the regulatory space.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So from what I gather from what you've mentioned, Tapelo, so it appears to me that you have a variety of agency, because you're from the ministry, right?
Correct.
What we call the ministry. You have a variety of agencies that are actually dealing with audiovisuals. You have, not just audiovisuals, you have ICASA looking at the telecom side of things. You have ICASA also looking at the TV broadcasting side of things. So, and then you have FPB, or Film and Publications Board. My question there, quickly before we go there, is it something you are looking at to bring the Film and Publications Board into the ambit of ICASA?
Yeah, I think there has been a debate around whether we need to follow the international trend of merging the regulators into one single content or regulator that will be that will be responsible for regulating all issues within the communication and electronic services. However, there is a risk in that element to say that it may potentially create overburdening of a mandate for one specific regulator. So the approach that has been followed in South Africa, particularly through the forum that I had just indicated, is that all the 3, including the .ZETNA regulators, were requested to go and develop strategies of the future. We understand that we are currently operating within the current era. However, the overburdening is something that may extend into the future. So the strategies are aimed at providing an indication as to how do the regulators see themselves in the future, and how is the sector or the digital media evolving over the next
Yeah.
foreseeable future. So that is going to assist in us being able to, instead of looking at merging them into one single regulator, but shifting around policy functions to ensure that each regulator performs effectively.
Yeah, well, I agree with you to a point, because I think we are in a digital converged space, and I always battle within the jurisdictions on the continent where we still have separations between the data connectivity and telco side, and then the audiovisuals broadcasting side. Well, you might say it's an overload that can happen there. I always think it's a political thing. But we'll get into what can be done to make sure that, as you said, the regulators see themselves properly and they act accordingly. Elvis, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, talk to us about what's happening in Zambia. How do you see what we have been talking about, and what is your starting point when it comes to regulatory capabilities, incapabilities, or inadequacies?
Okay, thank you about that. So my name is Elvis Vesa. I'm Manager Technical Services from the Independent Broadcasting Authority, that is Zambia. So in Zambia, we have, contrary to what South Africa has, they have a converged regulator. In our case, we have separate regulators for broadcasting and telecoms. So as the Independent Broadcasting Authority, Zambia, we regulate broadcasting. While we have a separate regulator for telecommunications, which is the Zambia Information and Communication Technology Authority, which is ZICTA.
Okay, hold it. And I want to bring in the audience. I'll let you carry on. Just by show of hands, the broadcasters that are here representing the countries, in your country, just by show of hands, if you have a unified, i.e., the broadcasting regulator or the broadcasting and the telco being regulated by one agency, just by show of hands, can I see which country is, we have Rwanda, South Africa. Please, can you mention your country's name, sir? Malawi, Kenya, and Botswana. So, and the rest, if you are, so I assume the rest of us are separated still. Can I have it by show of hands, please, so we can see the countries? Yeah, Nigeria, of course, I know, I know that. Oh, Ghana. You're from Zambia, yeah, Prof, Ghana. You're from Zambia, sir, right? Okay, yeah, Zambia. And Mali, okay. So the question is, when we finish with the operator, the question is, I want to come to individual of you, just two of you each, to tell us why is it that you've maintained that position? Why, please, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just because the government tells us so. We can change it if we wanted to. I would like to hear why is that position that you are maintaining, if you are aligned, or if you are singular, or if you are operating on both spaces, why is that so? So, Elvis, you start first with Zambia. Why do you think that position exists? Apart from its historical antecedents, why hasn't it changed? Or is it the best position to be in?
Well, I think it's multifaceted to begin with. Of course, there is a history behind it, where we are coming from, and I think from what the way the institution settings were structured, from the onset, it follows that the way the different sectors or services were being regulated based on the technical or technological and economic characteristics of the medium. So, for example, voice telecommunications was being regulated based on the fact that there's a different technology that is being used for telecommunication. There is also different economic characteristics associated with it. And then when it came to broadcasting, there was a different technology associated with it, the economic characteristics. So they saw it fit to have a separate regulator in that space, according to the way the technological and economic characteristics were back then. So we had this issue where we have a separate regulator for telecommunication and then broadcasting. Now, in the converged digital environment, there's been actually a a debate around it, and conversations have been had. Regulate broadcasting in the converged digital environment, where the convergence that we have is beyond just the convergence of technologies or infrastructure, end-user devices, services, content. There's also one important aspect, which is the convergence of regulatory frameworks. So having had discussions and having done research with our sister regulator, which is ZICTA, we have actually driven a motion with the different ministries. As you may be aware, ZICTA falls under a different ministry, which is Ministry of Technology and Science, and IBA falls under a different ministry, which is the Ministry of Information and Media. So the proposed regulatory reforms that we have made so far, it's to propose that we have changes at ministerial level, because there has to be governance structural changes at ministry level, and which then trickles down to the institutional settings for the different regulators. And then from there, we have to see how the two regulatory frameworks that we have can now be either merged or enhanced. So in the context of enhancement of the regulatory framework, that has been somehow easier because it's within the powers of the current institutional setting. So we have actually started to make a number of changes in the regulatory framework. So ZICTA, working hand in hand with us as IBA, we have made changes in our laws which we've proposed, and it's going to be before Parliament, hopefully this coming year. But these regulatory frameworks that we have proposed for change are very holistic, and they are really responsive to the regulation of broadcasting in the digitally converged environment. Now, the challenge that is there is that the changes at ministerial settings, those are not changes that can be made just technically as technical people sitting and saying, how do we do it? It's also, it has a political connotation to it, how the government want the institutional settings at ministerial levels to sit, which in turn also influences the government agencies that are responsible for regulation of broadcasting and telecoms. Okay,
awesome. So let me quickly pick up on those suggestions that you've made through the different ministries. What are the elements of it, quickly, if you have it at hand?
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. So basically, what we have as IBA, we have proposed a holistic regulatory framework, because the current framework is designed in such a way that the focus was more on traditional broadcasting. There wasn't much focus on the online broadcasting or regulation of broadcasting on the online space. So one of the proposals is to make sure that the regulatory framework that we have proposed is to be technologically neutral, so that the regulation that we are proposing should not be based on technology, to such an extent that even when technology changes, the regulatory framework will not be affected. Then the other focus of the new or proposed regulatory framework is to be focused on the service and the market, because the interests that are there is that even if technology changes, the market interests, the service interests will literally remain the same. And we have two aspects of regulation in the proposed law, which is the behavioral regulation and structural regulation. Now, structural regulation pretty much focuses on the technological aspects of broadcasting and telecommunications. Then we have the behavioral aspect, which focuses on content, conduct, context, ethics, professionalism, and so on and so forth. So with that, the proposals are focused more on the behavioral side, because when we talk about online broadcasting, we are talking about also protection of minor, how ethical the content is, service, access, and so on and so forth. So the critical elements have been moving away from designing a regulation that is focused on technology to a regulation that is focused on the content, on the service that is to be delivered.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Makwetu, so you've been talking to us about the digital creativity white paper and the frameworks that you've set in place. And I want to believe that the reason why why this is being put in motion is to get a set of reforms into the industry and the marketplace. Question, how do you intend to make sure that the guys that you are looking after, how do you make sure to implement these reforms that you are putting in the frameworks? What are those things that you want to put in place to make sure that the CASA, Film and Publication Board, and all these guys are able, they have the capability and the capacity to be able to implement the reforms that you are suggesting? Otherwise, it becomes just white paper on paper.
Thank you very much for the question. I think at the risk of repeating what Tapelo has indicated, the discussion around the fact that how do we make sure that we capacitate our regulators moving from the analog to the digital, but also the fact that the issues have now expanded, given some of the challenges that are now emerging because of the digital environment. From the entity oversight and even from the ministry, we have regular engagements over and above the policy principles that will issue out to make sure that they get implemented. There's a very close relationship between the department and our regulators. But I think more importantly, we are in the process of trying to engage our executive authority to look at a digital regulatory bill that will make sure that all the issues that Tapelo has indicated are actually under one single regulator, to make sure that we're able to take care of an array of issues that are coming out, as he has indicated, cyberbullying, protection of citizens, hatred, all those issues. So we are actually in the process of trying to engage our political principals, just so that we are able to illustrate to them it's quite important that we make sure that we have a single regulator, but also a well-capacitated regulator, given also the international trends, because, I mean, we're not immune to most of the things that are happening around the world.
No, we're not immune. Just for my education, who's currently regulating online content, online broadcasting? Who's currently in charge of that, Tapelo?
Am I audible? Oh, yes.
Yeah, you are.
Currently, it's the Film and Publications Board. So they are responsible for initially they were responsible for the classification of films, games, and content. However, currently their mandate, as I mentioned earlier, has been expanded to not only classify, but also to issue licenses to enforce compliance as well by all distributors of online content, including your social media platforms. So
Tapelo, let me come in there.
Yeah.
How do you regulate TikTok right now?
So currently, with distributors such as TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and YouTube, the FPB has adopted self-regulation as well as co-regulatory mechanisms.
Self-regulation.
Self-regulations, yes. So this is something that they are still building currently, because their expanded mandate was just recently enacted and implemented with effect from the 1st of March in 2022. So the organization is currently building effective regulatory instruments that will be used also to monitor enforcement by these
All right,
distributors.
I'm going to put you on the spot still, bro. So how long has TikTok been operating in South Africa?
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You get where I'm going with this?
Yes.
So my question is, why do regulators always have to be coming in from behind? Now, I mean, it's not for you to answer. It's what we need to deliberate about. We move on, right? Let's keep that under consideration whilst we move on, because I want to bring the audience in on this. I want to bring the broadcasters in on this. And I want broadcasters to tell us, from their own jurisdiction, from their countries, as broadcasters right now, what are those things? What are the factors that you see, both within your jurisdiction and maybe externally across Africa, that needs to be reformed in the industry that we are in? What are those things that you, top of your mind, just two each? I will take about 3 or 4 countries, and with that we can have a conversation about how we go about reforming them, right? First, I would like to start with Prof. Prof, you don't mind me, Prof. Amin. I would like to start with you, Ghana, Director General of Ghana is right here in the front. Prof, the reason why I picked on you because, was it 4 months ago you were in Lagos, Abuja. You were talking to the broadcasters in Nigeria, and you mentioned quite a few things that needs to change. I want you to bring some of them to board here with our audience right across Africa. Just tell us, from where you sit, what are those things that are top of your mind, regulatory-wise, in the industry that you think needs to change? And anything else you want to tell us, sir?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very interesting discussion, and the Ghanaian experience is not helpful at all. We are simply not too different from the Zambian story. And we should be very clear. The problem, we are regulatory agencies, like you said, are always coming from behind. But there's a certain, the new media ecosystem has certain dynamics, raises problems for regulation. We start from the position often by saying jurisdictional issues. The new media into our jurisdiction from another jurisdiction. And before even the government could say, hey, Jack, majority of the citizens are using it. That's one issue, but I think that shouldn't be a problem. Because when there are infractions, these same external bodies seek internal jurisdictional issues to resolve them. I think there is more to learn from Nigeria compared to Ghana in terms of how they are able to invoke their own laws to hold external media systems court. For example, using the advertising law to hold on to Facebook and other things. We don't have that in Ghana. We are far behind. But I think also one other dynamic in the new media ecosystem has to do with the fact that by the time you get to discover that this is a formidable medium that we must pay attention to, the local interest groups are so strong. And 2, political actors, especially legislators, also develop interest in not regulate.
Prof, 1 second. I apologize for interjecting. It's not in my place. But you said local interest group. I'm wondering, just I am, others might be wondering, can you expatiate on who are these local interest groups that may be playing in this space?
Okay. You see, when you live in a democratic system or so-called multi-party democracy, as we are beginning to experience more in Africa, the way political parties are funded and the way the electoral system occurs means that most political, especially legislators in parliament, have interest in media ownerships. And they are reluctant for any regulatory framework that will limit their ability to make money. And what is critically different from when you compare the new media ecosystem to the old for us broadcasters is the fact that in the new media ecosystem, lies sells more than truth. That's why we are stuck with what we now call fake news or whatever. The point is that if I set up a company to generate fake news and put it out there, I will make more money quickly than somebody who is doing regular, proper public service broadcasting. And once I'm able to raise the money, I am going to use it to ensure that locally, if there are efforts to stop me, it doesn't happen. And so it's an open lobbying system. So these agencies, those who are purveyors of fake news to raise money because clickbaits and other things have more economic power locally than traditional broadcasters. So if you want to go into regulations to limit them, you're going to come across some resistance, subtle but formidable, in terms of preventing regulatory agencies from updating their books so that they can be active. So it's a very complicated. Regulatory agencies derive their power from legislation.
Yes.
Try it. It won't go through the parliament. It will end up there for so many years. In Ghana, I'll give you an example. For the past 20 years or more, I think, we've had the broadcasting bill. A bill. For the past 20 years in Ghana, we can't, because the agencies who have their interest to serve for lack of are. That is what, when it comes to regulation. If a country like Ghana cannot pass broadcast, and the bill has been more than 20 years draft. The last time they tried talking about it last year, some of us were laughing because that draft of 20 years ago cannot be passed into law. We need to scrap it and start a new draft because the ecosystem has changed completely. But try it. It will not get through parliament. It will go to parliament, lie there for another 20 years because majority of the parliamentarians are media owners.
And they are happy with the status quo.
And of course, they are making money from the business, and that is where it will happen. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I will put Alhaji Dembos on standby from Nigeria, but first I want to go to my brother Berard from the Seychelles. I always like to hear from you, bro, because I know what you're saying. No, Berard from the Seychelles. Just another data. So Berard, can you give us your insight into those reforms that you think as broadcasters, we should expect from our regulators? Maybe something that you've achieved in the Seychelles, and maybe something that you think should be achieved generally across the board.
Good morning. The last. As far as Seychelles, the best. It cannot be fragmented in terms of especially content. We are having issues with regards to Muscari as described. We have respect to other over-the-top coming into the country. How is that regulated? As a country that has high internet penetration, the national broadcaster, for example, is at a disadvantage with respect to basically the other broadcasters that are coming in from multi-choice, Netflix, etc., or even the local ones. The Muscari is similar to the SABCs. And if you were to discuss online versus traditional and others, including the regulator is dealing with the telecoms, who are also in the broadcast business, who are also conflicted in terms of conflicting with us because they have the bandwidth, they have the content, and for it to be really well looked at and regulated, we need one regulator, in my view. For the Seychelles, it's quite well regulated. There are challenges, but speaking to one and in relation to the government helps. That's my perspective on that one. I'm not too much of an expert in regulatory matters, so you have to apologize. I have to apologize for that.
All right, okay, thank you. So I'll put on notice my president from NBC. I think you will speak in the capacity of your position from the country, NBC, as well as how you see it regionally. But first, can we hear from the Director General of the Nigerian Television Authority, Alhaji Dembos, right at the front here. Alhaji, I want you to tell us, from where you sit, I mean, to all intents and purposes, Nigeria Television Authority is, I'm sure you call yourself the largest network in Africa. I know that is true because obviously, because of the numbers in the country. What are those regulatory issues that you wake up in the morning and you say, I wish this wasn't there? And if you can just give us your insight about this, and then we can get the panel and the audience to discuss it, and let's see if we can find a way of how things can start to change.
Well, thank you very much. Let me start by addressing the issue of the regulatory bodies in my country, Nigeria. When Nigerian Television Authority was established in 1977, it was saddled with the responsibilities of both broadcasting and also regulating the sector. Then, as time goes on, the sector was deregulated, and we had a lot of players. So I think the government then thought it's necessary that you cannot operate and also be, regulating your activities. That is not going to augur well for other competitors in the field. That led us to the issue of the establishment of the NBC. After separating the two responsibilities of broadcasting and also regulating broadcast in Nigeria, the NBC was established, and of course, to date, that is the regulatory body that is in charge of broadcasting in Nigeria. Now, I'm looking at the issue of the online social media. We have what is called NCC. NCC is the regulatory body, is also in charge of telecom and also the social media activities in the country. Now, when you look at the quantum of what had transpired over time, I think the only thing that one would have thought that would have been done differently is the issue of separating the powers of the NBC and that of the NCC. And I think this is one issue that needs to be addressed so that we will get all the necessary parties and stakeholders having their efforts towards sustaining the sector. But if you look at presently the efforts of government in trying to regulate the excesses of the social media, I know you all know what happened last year. The issues of Nigerian government and some of this online medium, especially the Twitter, I think there is a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest in the sense that, of course, information you dish out to the citizens must have to have some kind of regulations. And that is how the issue of conflict between Twitter and Nigerian government came about. So these are issues that I personally think that one would have thought that maybe something different would have been the case as the case of Nigerian government and Twitter. Thank you very much.
Right. Alhaji Dembos, before you give the mic, can you hold on 1 or 2 seconds? I don't want to let you go that easily. Where are you at with this, if it's a push or if it's a recommendation? Where is the country sitting with this in terms of bringing the two agencies together? I mean, I know that obviously you will have temperament on what you say, but your own opinion, do you think this is ever going to happen? Because, and do you think it should happen? Well, you do think it should happen. So where do you think this is in terms of where you are at in Nigeria, bringing both agencies together under one regulatory framework or ministry?
Well, I think almost saying the same thing. The issue of bringing these two, you see, most times, some of these policies that are being implemented in this part of the world, talking about Africa, they are borrowed policies. And if you try to reason with them and ask questions, you hardly get a satisfactory answer as to why certain policies are being implemented. But having said that, I think we must have to look at the level of development sometimes when we borrow some of these policies. Of course, in developed countries, so much of this will go through, but of course, in my country, for one, we have peculiarities. And I was just discussing with one of my colleagues yesterday, taking a look at the difference between the various democracies we have in Africa. Some are called democracies, but some are more or less like dictatorship, that in a form of democracy. But if you look at a Nigerian context, democracy in Nigeria has no limit. People practice democracy. We want to see democracy thrive in Nigeria as much as it happened in the US, but you know the level of development is quite different. The technological development is different. And peculiarities of security and some other underlying factors are also different. So these are some of the things that I don't think some of these policies are rightful and can be encouraged or could be sustained in African context. So I think that is my own point of view.
I take that to be your answer to say, no, it's never going to happen in Nigeria.
Maybe.
All right. Okay. My president, can we give my chief the microphone? I always enjoy listening to you as well, Mr. President, because you always have a way of contextualizing this stuff in a way that even I, with this limited knowledge, seems to be able to get it. Now, tell us, where do you see this, how do you see this shaping up? And what I need you to speak to specifically is the reformation of the regulatory space in the broadcasting industry or the broadcast and digital media industry, converged space in Africa, coming from the Namibian experience.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. But before I get there, I think I need to maybe amplify a point that was made by Ntombi around seeking to have the public broadcaster being paid for content that goes onto platforms that have a commercial value. I think that's a very, very good point. And the reason why that is important, you find that if you are a public broadcaster, the view always is that whatever you have, you must always give for free. And the private entities, the paid TV entities have been exploiting that as well. The Namibian case, I have refused to allow content to go to any of such spaces without being paid, to the extent that we were reported at the regulator. I said, no, but it takes money. It takes equipment, it takes people, creativity to create whatever content we have. And some we even buy. So for someone just to come and say, we would want it for free, that cannot happen. So I really just want to commend you for that, and especially for the country as well, looking at that. And then the second point is we have the mobile operators who happen to have bandwidth. Now, they also want to play in the space of content provision. And in the Namibian case, we spoke to the telcos, we said, look, can we go into a partnership? You have the bandwidth, we have the content. Can we go into a revenue share model? And they said, no, you just bring the content. We will put it on for you, but we will not share revenue. I said, not a damn. That can't happen, because your numbers as a telco will naturally go up by virtue of content that is local. Because in the bigger scheme of things, within all the countries where we are operating, local content is the one that determines where the flow of movement of people will be. So until that recognition is coming through, no content will be for free. And that position we're maintaining. And we've last had discussions with the telcos 9 months ago. They are the ones now knocking at the door. They want to talk, we must have new deals. I'm telling them it's still cold, just wait. Once it gets warm, we will have that discussion. And that is really just to push the envelope to a level. When we go and sit at the table, we should then be coming in from a position of serious power. So those discussions are on now, and they all want. So that's the one side. Now looking at the Namibian experience of regulation, it's relatively new for us. The regulator that is currently in place regulates everything from telecoms to broadcasting and all of that. Effectively started late 2008, but before that there was a body, but it was very ineffective. So when the telecom space was deregulated, so all interest came in and everybody wanted to be there. So the regulator was then put in place, and it's one regulator, it literally regulates anything. Like Prof was saying, we also had legacy issues in that when broadcasters were set up, there were particular laws that were drafted to set this up. But many of those laws have remained archaic. They were totally not in tune with the realities that we are having. So from an NBC perspective, we are now only about 1 year or so under regulation. But what we did was to already plan in advance that should it happen that the regulator comes on board, that we are already compliant. So the issues of content, percentages, the issues of efficiency, because there's that strong element of the consumer experience that regulators are also responsible for. So we had to take care of all these things, but equally, we raised our concerns also with the shareholder to say that, look, part of our equipment is also archaic. If the new rules from a regulatory perspective will kick in, and we can't react, let's say, within 48 hours in terms of fixing a problem, whose fault will that be? ISDG will not take it. Because if the shareholder can't fund me to have equipment that will be great, then we'll pass on the problem to the shareholder. So those discussions has also now assisted us to get adequate funding from a CAPEX perspective so that we can actually build many of these things here. Gets to DDT, we are currently standing at 74.5% for TV. Our country is very huge but sparsely populated. In making the numbers, we have seen that DDT is a very expensive exercise. So we've taken a deliberate position also to say that we will no longer go the DDT route. We will go DTH, which is direct to home, satellite. Now, experience also taught us that if one had known earlier, as they say, hindsight is always a 20/20, one actually should have gone DTH because you would have had immediate coverage for the whole country. So we are now at that stage and place where we are looking into that. But for us, we are not continuing with DDT because it does not make economic sense. The numbers simply don't add up because the only thing that DDT in our case has changed is just the signal. Your transmission network still remains the same. It's still the transmitters that are standing there. But with DTH, that would have been a total different stories for us. So what we are seeking from regulators is that they must also put in some form of protection for the public broadcaster, especially seeing to it that the public broadcasters in the main are not commercially driven. Now, if the same rules and regulations that were created predominantly for private media are now applied to us, then we will be coming in at a serious disadvantage. So these are some of the issues that we are currently, from a Namibian perspective, that we are busy discussing.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, boss. I think you speak for most of the broadcasters as well. So let me turn quickly to the panel. Tombi, I'll start with you, and I'll start with the last point that the DG Namibian Broadcasting Corporation made, which is the question of how do you protect the protection issue? How do you make sure that as regulators, or the guys that you look after, your regulators, how do they protect public service broadcasters from the hyena, from the influx of, and as the Prof put it, jurisdictional issues that are coming from outside, external issues that are coming from outside with the new space we found ourselves? What are those things that you are putting in place to make sure that these guys are well protected?
Yeah, it is actually not an easy one. It's quite a challenge. I think in my presentation, I alluded to the fact that we have a legislation that is mainly focusing on the SAPC as an entity to make sure that we are able to support the SAPC, but further than that, making sure that the SAPC is able to participate in the digital space, offering your over-the-top services, as the chairperson or the president has said, making sure that content that is coming from the SAPC is also paid. They come up with some certain bouquets where you can subscribe to make sure that they are indeed protected. But secondly, when it comes to DTT, I've got colleagues here from Centec who are responsible for our DTT program, making sure that the public broadcaster and the broadcasters in general are not worse off post-DTT, making sure that they are well catered for. So those are just some of the strategies that we are putting in place to make sure that the public broadcaster is actually protected, because, as you said, the competition is quite stiff, and the revenues are actually moving away from public broadcasters to the different platforms. So how do we make sure that we once again bring back the audiences to the public broadcaster, but of course making sure that they also transform and come up with the new platforms?
I noticed that you didn't say you were going to give them more money. Or I'm sure they will do with more money, but thank you very much. It's just a moot point. Elvis, what is the state of play in Zambia? How are you protecting the public broadcasters and other broadcasters that might be disadvantaged from this influx of jurisdictional attack that we are seeing from outside our shores?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting in the sense that for long, public broadcasters, they never really thought that they'll be in this space where they'll be competing with the private broadcasters. And they were so comfortable because they were protected by the state and they were taken care of so much that they never thought that they have to move out of the comfort zone and really face the new realities, technology, market, and so on and so forth. But in the Zambian context, I think as far back as over 10 years now, from the financial side, the public broadcaster had to be empowered through what we call TV levy. Yeah, so people pay TV levy, and this basically is for the purpose of financing the public broadcasters' operations. So financially, I think...
So that's like a TV license kind of thing?
Not necessarily, because it's paid by the people. For, like in the current dispensation, when someone is subscribing for pay TV,
they pay a TV levy. And that TV levy goes to the public?
Goes to the public broadcaster.
All right, okay.
Yes, so that's how...
So that presupposes that you need a large number of people who are buying DSTV and Star Times and all these pay TV services.
Those, yes. So basically, like we have 6 we call them subscriber management service providers, so they are pay TV providers. Yeah, so each one of them from their subscriber base, they collect TV levy, which they remit.
Okay, that's an interesting one, Elvis, and it's that's why we're here to learn from each other, because now I want to ask you, now okay, I suppose it's easily determinable, you can find out, because I was going to say now you are relying on MultiChoice to tell you exactly how many new subscribers they have every day, right? Because
Yes.
then otherwise how are you going to connect
Yes,
this?
so it's also an interesting dynamic because we've been working on ascertaining, of course working with other government agencies to see to it that what the pay TV providers are declaring as what they have collected is indeed reflective of the actual collection rather than that probably they are under declaring. So I cannot maybe disclose right now.
Okay.
But
It's
something that we are working on with other government agencies to make sure that there is that accountability. Now,
Yeah.
the second aspect of protection for the public broadcaster is through regulation, because the public broadcaster has a mandate. Their mandate is very different from the private broadcasters. Their primary mandate is public service through broadcasting services, which also falls under the aspects of universal provision. Because for a public broadcaster, when it comes to providing information to the general citizenry, it's beyond the commercial interests. It's about universal provision, it's about providing a service, even in areas that are not economically viable. But the private sector, or the private broadcasters, they don't so much have interest in places that are not so economically viable.
Right.
But the public broadcaster, that's where they matter most.
Universality, you have
Yes,
to go
so
there.
even in terms of regulation, they are differently regulated. Currently, the public broadcaster, they have their own law, their own act. There's a ZNBC Act that really prescribes their operation. Then, as a regulator, we also have certain aspects of how we regulate them, which is different from the way we regulate the private broadcaster. So where the regulation is more or less the same for the public and private broadcaster is on the aspects of professionalism, the content, the conduct, the context. Those aspects are pretty much the same. Yeah, so even in the proposed regulation that we have, where we want actually to bring our public broadcaster to a level, it's a variant which is similar to what Ofcom of UK has with BBC, where we are going to have a charter with a public broadcaster which will prescribe what is expected of them. They have their kind of KPIs which they are supposed to meet. Meanwhile, issues of financing, as much as they would diversify, but the aspect of TV levy, or which is also proposed to evolve to broadcast levy, will actually continue to make sure that they are supported.
So Elvis, what you are saying is awesome. Thank you. I have a question that I want to put in the fray, and it might not be a very popular question, especially since this is a gathering of public broadcasters, but I've always been asking myself, does it matter? Does it matter who provides, who the broadcaster is? Does it have to be, in your case, ZNBC? What if, give me another private broadcaster that you have in Zambia.
Okay, right.
Just the name.
Diamond TV.
What if Diamond TV is providing public broadcasting service and they want to tap it into that levy? Would you give it to them?
That's also an interesting dimension because it has actually come up. Like what do we define as public service? It actually lies in the definition, because public service, the way it is defined, it touches on certain areas that the commercial broadcasters may not be so interested in. Yeah, especially in aspects where they are mandated to provide a certain service at either for free or at a very subsidized rate. Okay. Now, the commercial broadcasters are not so interested in giving away their content for free or at a very cheap price. So that's where actually the two diverge from. Nonetheless, there is a context of public broadcasting where there is a mandate to provide a public service in the context of broadcasting. For example, in the time of COVID, all broadcasters were required to broadcast information on COVID sensitization, protection, and so on and so forth. And that became a public service in that because they were mandated to provide that service for free. Now, it was a role that, as a regulator, through the law, we had to enforce on all broadcasters to ensure that they do that because there was a crisis. Now, there is only so much that the commercial broadcasters can do in terms of offering a public service or a free so-called service, because even then, their complaint is that it's supposed to be airtime. You are supposed to pay for this service. So even if we are doing it, we will do it because we understand there is a crisis and it's only for a limited period of time. Nonetheless, when it comes to a public broadcaster that is mandated to provide a service of that nature, there's actually no limit in terms of how much they have to go or how far they have to go, either in terms of coverage, in terms of time, to provide that service to the public.
Thank you. Just finally, for my own education, ZMBC, your public service broadcaster, they get revenue via this levy only, or they also seek advertising?
They also do advertising.
They also do advertising. All right, awesome. Okay. Tapelo. Yes. Tapelo, the lady wants to take over from you. Would you allow?
No, it's okay.
It's okay. Please go ahead.
No, the thing is, I think it was triggered by what Zambia has done. In the SAPC bill, I think I forgot to share that we are making a proposal to say, instead of the TV license, we need to introduce what we call a household levy. That is not a device dependent, because we've got high evasion rate in the country. People don't want to pay TV license. However, public content or public interest content is quite important. So in the bill, we are introducing the household levy. And interestingly, there was a proposal from one of the stakeholders to say MultiChoice should be the one that collects on behalf of the SAPC. and that was fiercely rebutted by MultiChoice that no, they are their competitor in a way, so they can't be collecting on behalf of the SAPC. So the discussion that we are having is to say, through our national treasury, how to make sure that the household levy is collected.
Okay.
And we're supposed to come up with a business
Okay,
case.
Ntombi. Yeah, madam, I need to pick you up on that one. I'll come back to you, Chief. We have about 15 minutes more. We'll try and trash these things out to finish, and any other questions. This household levy, you call it, yeah? How do you, okay, what's it based on? Is it based on whether you have TV in your house or not? Or is it based on if you have TV in your house or not? Or TV or radio, that is?
Not at all, hence we call it a household levy because it's not device dependent.
At all?
However, no. However, we know that in any household you have a device of some kind. Hence, we don't want to link it.
What if I don't have a device?
Well, at the end of the day, we have to make sure that government provides public information.
So government will give me a device to put in my house, so they can charge me household levy for it.
I think the principle behind is that government is responsible to make sure that public content is broadcasted by the public broadcaster. So it's important that each and every household is responsible to pay that particular levy.
Awesome. And more seriously now, that levy goes solely to SABC. Okay. Tapelo,
It
please.
will.
Yes.
Yes, we'll come to the audience just now, Prof, and we'll take questions from the audience, plenty. I just want Tapelo to chip in quickly, bro.
Thank you. I think if I can just take off from the conversation and some of the points that Alson Tombi has mentioned. I think the Director General of Namibia has mentioned that content is not free. And there's also another major challenge of an unfunded public mandate, because regulators are required to provide and disseminate information to all citizens of the country to make sure that it is accessible at all times. However, there's a major risk also from a financial perspective that is incurred by public broadcasters in the form of displacement costs, and that is one of the main issues that the South African public broadcaster is confronted with because of the limited number of platforms. You find in instances where that the public service mandate needs to be accommodated. If I may refer to an example of the outbreak of COVID, of the pandemic, where the government consistently had to brief and inform the public about the outbreak, you'd find that they would need the public broadcaster in that case, and the public broadcaster would then have to display some of the paying content that is aligned to advertising as well, and displace that to accommodate the government. However, it is of vital importance that the public service mandate is funded to some extent in order to be able to, one, to assist the public broadcaster to cater for those risks, and two, to enable the sustainability and consistency as well of providing, of fulfilling their public service mandate. So as part of the initiatives, the initiative with regards to the household levy that we are providing, the view is that in one way or another, through it, radio, through your cell phone, through TV, you will access, or you will somehow have access to the public service information that is provided. So each and every household would have to compensate for that. And I think, as Ntombi mentioned, is one of the biggest challenges or obstacles that we are faced with is the collection mechanisms that will be implemented to collect the household levy, so that we can be able to cater for the unfunded public mandate that is confronted by the SABC.
Awesome. We'll come back to you to pick up any other points that you have. I have to go to my chiefs here. Who's got the mic? Can we bring the mic to the DG of TBC, Tanzania Broadcasting Corporation? Is right here, Dr. Ayub. Church.
Asante sana, na nitajitahidi kuhakikisha kwamba naongea kwa kifupi sana. Natumaini kuna wanaotafsiri kule, sio?
Do you have an interpreter in the house?
No, but Kiswahili is also an official language.
Fantastic.
Of the African Union.
Doctor, 100%.
Yes. First of all, just briefly, I just want to pick from where my Zambian friend was talking about whether a private media that is broadcasting
can do a public service duty.
Exactly. No, I think some of these are legal issues. For example, the regulator, if you go there to register your broadcasting, seeking a broadcasting license, they will ask you which category. If it's commercial, it's commercial. If you choose to broadcast public service content,
that's your problem.
That's upon you. It's your problem. You simply cannot turn to the government and say, you give me money, levy, because I'm doing the same thing that the public broadcaster is doing. The public broadcaster has a license, which is for a public broadcaster. So that's one point. But the other issue I thought I should respond to was the fact that why should the public broadcaster deserve, all these, whatever we are talking about, levy? It's because of one reason he explained very clearly, that we have to go. Like you take Namibia, for example, even if you have a huge chunk of your land, which is desert, and there are very few people, scanty population, you still have the obligation to put infrastructure there so that those people also, no matter how few they are, they can get that service, which is a constitutional right for them. And then the other one is, of course, the fact that when you look at content these days, if you look at the private media, they are not obliged to have content that is serious about your culture, about issues that reflect your lives. They will put content like Jerry Springer, to someone in rural areas, Jerry Springer, really? And others I don't even want to mention. They will put music which has no relevance to your own music, and other content, of course. Now, the public service has an obligation to make sure, and I'm not saying that you should churn out boring programs, no, but we have an obligation to make sure that we give our people what reflects their lives, including cultural products that are relevant to their own lives. And that may not be commercially viable, but if that information is available, it's important for any country. Thank you.
All right.
And by the way, the last point, Ntombi, I liked your point where you mentioned that not device-based. You are already ahead of time, my sister.
Awesome.
Because I was doing research. For example, the BBC right now, they are thinking about how to change this license fee that has been there for years. You know why? Because right now somebody doesn't have to. They used to have police going into your homes and say, hey, you have a TV, you have a radio set?
Pay your license.
These days, there are households where people don't even have TV sets. They don't have radio sets. But they still get information. Thank you.
And that's crucial. My DG from RBA, I'll put you on standby. I want to go to Prof. After Prof, I'll come to you. Can we come to Prof quickly? DG of, Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Prof.
I think I want to follow up the same thing. I had commendation for South Africa when they started this conversation about a new levy, which is not based on device. And I listened to the discussion here. A question that I have always had is, in the old system, commercial entities like hotels, business organizations also paid a license fee for their device. So in your new system, what happens to non-household entities that are commercial in nature? Will they also pay? I want to learn. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come back to, when we take the final round-up from the panelists, I'm sure Ntombi will address that. Yes, can we give it to our DG, please, our host DG? Yes, please.
Thank you, Ben. I want to speak, I think, for the commercial broadcasters, though I am more public. I think we are eating into their space. And I blame it on the governments. Because the absence of sustainable financing models for public broadcasters pushes us to go into the commercial space. We've become commercial. We've actually become more commercial than the commercial players themselves. So I think it's a time that, and it cuts across the African continent. I have not heard of any good model on the continent where the public service broadcasters are financed in a sustainable way that gives them the room to run away from this commercial pressure. When you look at my situation here, I'm almost 80% of my revenues are from commercial. So I tend to be fighting every day with the commercial players simply because I do not have a sustainable financing model as a public broadcaster that is going to enable me, churn out content that is not commercially driven. And that's why the model from South Africa sounds interesting. I mean, a household levy that's not device dependent. That sounds good. But my only worry is the modality of collecting that.
How do you collect it?
How do you collect it? It's going to be a huge challenge for collection. And that's, I think, where that's the role of the regulator in these things. My situation here in Rwanda, our regulator combines telecom and so many things. But the regulator has a huge amount of money from what they call it's called what? It's called the Universal Access Fund.
From the telcos.
From the telcos. how can the public broadcaster eat into that fund? There's a huge fund that is there in the reserve banks by the regulator.
You're joking, my DG. How do you want to get into the telco's money?
I rest my case.
All right. So, yeah, okay. I have a gentleman who, DG, you want to say something?
Very short.
Well, 1 second. I'll give you the final word. There is a gentleman that's raised up his hand there. Will you please introduce yourself, sir, and then make your point?
Sure. I'm a homie. My name is Rwanda Albert. I'm also into media in Rwanda. When I say I'm a homie, I'm from Rwanda, so I've been to that. I think I'd like to share something that happened in 1981, last century. That was when François Mitterrand in France got elected. And the next thing, the Minister of Culture in France imposed to private and public content providers, he imposed to have it all broadcast, produced, aired, 80% of all things on air in French. In Europe, all of these societies and economies, as big as they are, they're so small compared to the United States and places like that. So it's not just in the UK, but everywhere. People, just like the church, they make the end consumer pay. They make the end consumer contribute to that. And for all of this time in Africa, we're still trying to wonder how to access other revenue authority in this country. When they have to get the money, they will get the money. So access to it, it's just a mindset, I think, that we have to say. If we want to stop whining about the fact that we need to hear the story from the lion and not just from the hunter, it's time that on this continent we say, we just have to fund our own storytelling. And it's not just a household, because I really love that idea, of course, of South Africa. But let's say, everybody here, everybody in this room must have content in his device, and that he has never paid for it. But if you take a levy at every time you buy a device that can have content, there should be a little tax that goes into, of course it's for each country to manage, but the writing, while I was started with François Mitterrand, it's that it was not just money for the public sector. It was also to give some punch and support to the private sector, because your private sector balances your public. I mean, you also get quality private production. So that's the whole, my contribution here in this point exactly is to say, it's a mindset. It's something that we need to do. It's governments and the people.
Yes.
If you want to keep your culture alive in this century,
it's down to
you
us.
better,
Yes.
go for it.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I 100% agree, and I also think it brings it back to that same issue of a system has been designed by South Africa to say we will be able to use this to collect, to fund public service broadcasting. The question is, A, how do you collect it, and how do you collect it fairly? So that my folks in the village that have a phone but cannot afford, well, I suppose if they can afford to buy airtime, they should afford to pay levy, right? It's just something to think about. DG, what do you have to say?
Yes, this one is a tricky one, because
It is a tricky one, isn't it?
some of the decisions are highly political. You talk funding, it depends where you stand and how you are seen as a public broadcaster. That will then determine whether the purse will be open, will put on heavy lock that you can't get there. So, in as much as we speak, we also know it's about what you do. And if you are not principled and tough in terms of what you do, and you stand on the side of being weak, then the system will actually get you into trouble. And should you be strong enough to say that, look, this is what we would want to do, then you will equally be seen as a problematic individual. So at the level of politics, that's typically what would be happening. But I always say that if political leadership would say that we espouse a value where our countries must prosper, one of the tenets that speaks to moving countries forward is a press that is respected in terms of what happens. Because when we're going to be displaying things that may not look good politically, it's also our way of saying that maybe things are not working. Remember, we are not politicians. So that element there is something sometimes that is a fine line to maneuver. That's the one. Currently at the NBC for the past 4.5 years, state funerals, independent days, and all these things are not for free. I do them at cost.
How do you manage that?
I invoice. Otherwise, I give you a piece on news which is 2 minutes.
And they pay you on
They
that
pay.
invoice?
They pay. They know. They will ask me, how much will you charge me for this event? And they pay. Because the point that was mentioned by one of the regulators is that if I have to have a broadcast that will run for 3-4 hours, that naturally for the day will erode my ability to generate revenue.
Yeah.
So on the basis of that, someone must pay for that. In any event, the subsidy that is there, it's not even enough to keep the business running. So you have to be tough. But as I was saying, it depends where you are operating from. One positive aspect that I currently have, which is also working well for the NBC in Namibia, is that the regulator now has started asking entities like DSTV to say, where is your local content? Even as a subscription business, you need to be producing content in Namibia. 3, 4, 5 months back, we signed a deal with DSTV where they appointed us as a producer of local films. So there's also an injection of funding that is coming our way, which is also growing local content in its core. So look, my position is that you cannot say you want these things and yet you don't want to fund them. The day you get appointed as DG, it's fanfare. But you can be taken out with, what is this thing that lifts up things? Forklift. Now, some of us, we embed ourselves in the cement. So you'll have to use and take the whole floor. Otherwise, I'm staying where I am.
All right. Thank you very much, DG. Right, so we need to be wrapping up now. So I'll come back to you guys to have your final say. So, Ntombi, starting with you. What is that takeaway that you want us, based on your presentation and the conversation so far, you want the broadcasters to focus on? Your takeaway, just to wrap it off, and then we'll go to the gentleman, and then that will be it for the panel. Ntombi.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the speakers has indicated that there is stiff competition between the public broadcasters and the new services. And the challenge is, whilst the public broadcasters have a public mandate that is not adequately funded, they also have to compete with these new services. So I think for me, the takeaway is really how, as governments, we can support the public broadcasters, but two, how do we ensure that we support them, that they become innovative and agile as well? Because fiscus is, in my country, is really dwindling. As much as we would want them to make sure that they continue with the public mandate, they also have to make sure that they're innovative. But with the household levy, we believe that we can be able to support the public mandate. But what is also key is to ensure that we cost the public mandate, because government cannot know how much it costs unless we cost the public mandate.
Okay, and just finally, I know I said that was the last, just quickly, this household levy fee idea, when do you think it's going to come to reality? Soon? And when are you guys going to provide some paper documentation that everybody can see how this is going to work?
Okay, as I've indicated, we are working on an SAPC bill. That is where that provision is contained.
That's where the provision is, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and hopefully by 2023, we would have submitted it to our cabinet for approval. But key to it, as it was indicated here, how do we ensure that it gets implemented effectively, the collection aspect of it. Hence, I've indicated that we are in discussions with our National Treasury to see how we can effectively collect the household levy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your contribution, Madam Toby. Ellis.
I think it's, for me, it's been more of us learning where we are coming from, where we are and where we are going, especially focusing on the lessons learned and how those lessons learned are actually informing the decisions we are making now and going forward. I will touch a bit on the regulatory frameworks. What we have in terms of the regulatory frameworks, it's something which you rightly pointed out that, you know, the pace of technological development or advancement is always faster than the pace with which we change the regulations. And that is inevitable.
Yes.
We can really not practically or realistically be at a point where the regulation is ahead of technology. Mm-hmm. So now, knowing things the way they are, the regulatory frameworks that we have should be designed in such a way that they are not discriminatory in nature, because where we've been placed right now is a context where we have online broadcasting and traditional broadcasting, which are not actually regulated the same. Mm-hmm. So the regulation, the way it is actually discriminatory. Now, the new regulatory framework is supposed to be dynamic to make sure that the broadcasting as a service is regulated the same regardless of the technology or the medium. Mm. Then the other aspect is that the regulation that we have generally is that it's static. And with that, if we don't reform them fast enough, they actually likely to harm competition, stifle innovation, and deprive the consumers of the benefits of the technological development.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the recommendation is actually to move in that direction, regulation-wise. Now, to summarize based on what we learned, I think ITU, that is the International Telecommunications Union, they did pretty well, I think, in terms of looking at regulating broadcasting in the digital age, which is the digital ecosystem. Are one, and the services are the same on this what I will call a stream. It's like on a level playing field, and then you have all different players now, which are not equal in terms of capacity. For example, when you look at the players on the online space, they have certain advantages in terms of reach, and which the regulatory frameworks have been challenged with. We are coming from a regime where there was limitation in terms of geography, but if someone is broadcasting, say, radio on the internet, they're broadcasting literally to the whole world. Mm-hmm. Well, someone who is broadcasting on traditional media, on FM, for example, they are limited in terms of geography. And even the context of competition, market, and so on, they have their play on that. Now, coming to what ITU did in terms of the research, which is 3 regulated aspects which they looked at. They looked at the legislative approach, they looked at the regulatory approach, and self-regulation. Now, for the legislative approach, they propose that, you know, we have to respond to convergence by coming up with a new law of how to regulate broadcasting in the digital ecosystem. And in the regulatory approach, they propose that we actually can reform the existing regulation to adapt it to the new trends in the digital ecosystem. And now in the self-regulatory approach, the proposal or the recommendation is that we engage institutions which consists of the players in the industry, other government agencies, more like a consultative approach to come up with these regulations which will respond to the regulation of broadcasting in the digital ecosystem. Now, from that, it's clear that there is...
Elvis,
Yes.
this is fascinating what you're saying, but I am being pressed for time. So if you can summarize this for me in 2 minutes, I will be very grateful, bro.
Great, that's where I'm actually driving at. Thank you for that. Yeah, so basically what we have learned is that there isn't a one-shoe-fit-all kind of regulatory approach which is existing right now, which we can say that when we do this, it actually solves all the problem. So what's, I think the way forward is that it's for us to actually start and learning every time after having done a regulatory impact assessment of having had this regulation tested in the real industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Elvis. And those items that you've highlighted, you've laid out, this is what I think I'm going to do with you. I'm going to engage you further for us to maybe do a paper or an article that explains this stuff, and we'll put it up on the BMA, we'll send it to the members and everyone here. Because I think you have some important issues there that even broadcasters and regulators could pick up from. But thank you very much for the summary. And last but not least, Tapelo, what is the takeaway? Just briefly, sir.
Thank you. I think for me there are 2 main key takeaways, and due to the fact that we're pressed for time, from a regulatory perspective, I think what stands out is agility. We need to focus more our regulations on and policy frameworks, and in the development of those frameworks and policies, we need to bear in mind that the market, particularly the online market, is moving at a rapid pace. So by the time that we are done with developing or reviewing our reform or reforming our policies, I think the DG from Ghana mentioned that by they've had a broadcasting bill for 20 years, and which by the time that they do consider approving it, the market will be far ahead. So in our policy development, we need to consider that from a regulatory perspective. But I think the second point that is very important, that is a takeaway, is the pursuing of or exploring various kinds of funding or sources of revenue for public broadcasters. And I think someone mentioned something that is very important with regards to partnerships, that the broadcasters also need to play in that space of establishing partnerships with private broadcasters, because particularly for broadcasters that have a mixed funding model, because you also want to grow that element of the revenue in order to also restructure your funding model. And I think those are the 2 key takeaways that I will take.
Awesome. Yeah. Those are really fantastic points that has been made. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give real appreciation to the panelists, Ntobi Makwetu, Elvis, and Tapelo. Where is the photographer, please? The photographer, please, if you could just take the panel photographs just for our publication, that would be great. Do I have a photographer in the house? Oh, sorry. Sorry to be putting you on last-minute rush. Yes, Elvis, if you guys just... All right, while they're doing that, I want to bring to the podium, thank you guys, thank you very much. I want to move on to the next presentation. And this presentation is, you know, when we talk about looking into the future is already here. I am sure that almost every single one of us in this house understand what we mean by OTT, over-the-top TV, and internet streaming. Of course we do. And the question is, as broadcasters, bar going on YouTube, what else are we doing to push, to fast track, to make sure that we have a spot, not just a spot, we have a good space within the OTT landscape? Because like it or not, it's here and it's exploding. So the next presentation will give us insight on how we can recognize the challenges, the hurdles that confront us as media owners within the OTT space, and more importantly, how these hurdles can be overcome and can be scaled. The person that's going to be delivering this presentation is one of our industry partners. It's Liquid, I think it's Liquid Technologies now, but we have here Liquid Telecom, it's fine. I'm sure she will clarify that for us. May I invite, and may you please appreciate for me, Ms. Miriam D. Calvallo, the GM Broadcast Media for Liquid. Miriam, floor is yours.
They've got my presentation. I think I just need the clicker. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to be here, attending this wonderful convention amongst all our industry colleagues. And I'd like to extend a huge thank you to the event organizers and the lovely people of Rwanda for hosting us. Just give me a moment to get my notes out here. Right, OTT and the internet streaming services in Africa. We'd like to recognize the hurdles and try and overcome them. By a show of hands here, who has Netflix or Amazon subscriptions? I can assure you, if we had to ask that same question somewhere in Europe, you would have seen most of the room raise their hands. The reason for this being that the penetration into Africa hasn't been what was expected from these giant streaming companies. The reason behind this is Africa is not like the rest of the world. We are unique. We have our own set of challenges, and a lot of these streaming giants are finding it very difficult to overcome these challenges. Internet penetration in Africa is estimated at around 33.9%. We have around 700 million people in sub-Saharan Africa that do not have access to the internet. We have 270 million people that live outside of mobile coverage areas. So this in itself poses a huge issue. Not only do these people not have access to the internet, they live in areas that have no mobile broadband coverage. They are unable to access these services. OTT is slowly starting its penetration into Africa, but given the challenges that I've briefly highlighted, terrestrial infrastructure being one of them, coupled with cellular coverage and high data costs probably being the most significant one, linear content distribution retains the market share of current revenue, and it seems that it will for the foreseeable future. DTH and DTT are still the main vectors for linear content distribution at present, and as I said, will continue to be into the foreseeable future. DTH currently captures the majority of the pay TV subscribers at around 65% of the market, and a substantial part of the free TV market at around 44%. Now we're coming to mobile data costs in Africa. As you know, data, internet access is readily available in the rest of the world. When it comes to Africa, it's a little bit taboo. Not only are data costs significantly higher than the rest of the world, the coverage is once again a problem in a lot of areas. This next slide shows you and gives you an idea of what most of the countries in Africa are paying for 1 gigabyte of data in US dollars. When you look at these numbers, you'll see that the cheapest one there is Ghana at around 61 US cents, with the highest one being St. Helena at $41. This is for 1 gigabyte of data. If you are streaming content, 1 gig will probably be gone before you've finished watching a movie. So how does that make it affordable for our people to access streaming content? And how do we overcome this challenge that poses a huge problem for subscribers in Africa to view this content that they so desperately would love to access? With these high data costs, not only must our subscribers pay for this data, they then have to pay the subscription to access the platforms too. Yes, there is free content, we know, but free content is not always the premium content that we would like to access. And the premium content is paid content. So when you are accessing that content, you're paying the premium to the streaming supplier, but you're also paying the premium that you need to use to access that content. So be it either your mobile terrestrial broadband or then your actual mobile cellular broadband. In Africa, terrestrial broadband hasn't had the reach into the rural areas that we would like to achieve. So a lot of these areas are still reliant on mobile broadband. Factoring these high data costs, it makes it not affordable for the average viewer in a home to access this content. So we understand the challenges. There are many. As I said, Africa is unique. We don't have the same challenges that other countries do or other continents do. We need to address these challenges and we need to find ways to overcome them. Almost 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25, making that Africa the world's youngest continent. It's critical for content providers and TV platforms to have a deep understanding of their target audience. Content is king, and local content is in high demand. Would you like to see more local content on these major streaming platforms? Do you feel that they adequately supply the content that is what you would like to see, what your children would like to see? In my opinion, yes, they have some local content, but they don't have the content that we are actually looking for. And this is why they have also not penetrated the African market the same way that they have the rest of the world. So not only are there the challenges of connection and connectivity and data costs, etc., there's also the issue of content. We like our local content, and we appreciate that content, and we would like to be able to view it, but we would like to be able to view it at no cost, right? We don't want to pay to view content that is created in our countries, content that is so significant to us, even to our children when it comes to education. This content can be made available online, they can have access to it, and it can definitely enhance the future of education going forward into Africa as well. So we have considered now that with mobile data costs being as high as they are, we can look at a new solution. And the new solution is to actually deliver these services using satellite. So satellite still continues to be the best option for reaching millions of viewers with a single signal. Thanks to its expansive coverage and unsurpassed reliability, satellite enjoys the highest penetration of all content delivery technologies into TV households. By 2022, 80% of internet traffic will be video. You can receive live and on-demand high-quality content anytime, anywhere, on any device. Satellite is uniquely positioned to address new consumption models across all verticals. And with OTT delivered via satellite, you can reach audiences even in the most remote areas. So that eliminates terrestrial connectivity, it eliminates mobile broadband connectivity, and it eliminates the high data costs that our consumers are facing. So if you take a look at our satellite coverage beams, you'll see that if we deliver these services via satellite, it completely takes away all the issues, well, not all the issues, but primarily most of the issues in terms of coverage and penetrating those hard-to-reach areas that have no other means of connectivity. We have a number of beams that cover Africa, and there are many satellites. I mean, this is just an example that I'm using with the Intelsat satellites that we use, but there are many satellite operators that have very good coverage and predominant access all over the African continent. So this is one of our KU band beams that we use quite actively in sub-Saharan Africa to deliver many TV services, not only OTT, but DTH services as well. We have beams that are more specific and focused, targeted in certain areas where we obviously need to deliver better services. So I'm just going to run through these beams quickly so you can have a look. We have concentrated areas which look into Central and East Africa. And we have another KU band spot beam into West Africa. So basically, the whole of Africa is covered. I'm just going to touch briefly on KA band. It's not really broadcast specific and probably not a service that I would necessarily use for broadcast, but it is one of the Liquid satellite product portfolios. So we'll just mention that as well. But it just gives you a nice view of the sort of reach you can have if you move satellite services over the continent as opposed to terrestrial or mobile services. To give you a little bit of statistics, the GSMA intelligence report showed that mobile phone subscribers stood at around 46% in sub-Saharan Africa, while the smartphone adoption was at around 64%. The data also revealed that mobile technologies and services contributed over $130 billion to the region's economy in 2021. The GSMA predicts that Africa will have 120 million new mobile subscribers by 2025, taking the total number of subscribers to 615 million. This is 50% of the continent's population. So we estimate that by 2025, 50% of the population will be a mobile subscriber. With some data that was released recently, also by the GSMA, that showed by the end of 2021, 5.3 billion people had subscribed to mobile services. This represents 67% of the entire global population. That is a lot of mobile subscriptions. So reading all this information, it really gives us an indication. The way that consumer demand is heading is definitely into the mobile space. People want to access content, they want to access it on their mobile devices. It's easy, it's convenient, you can access it anytime, anywhere, if you have the connection. So Nigeria boosted 199 million mobile connections as of the end of March this year, according to the country's Communication Commission. Their telephone connections per 100 people stood at 104.5% between January and March. So according to the GSMA, Nigeria tops Africa in smartphone connections with 163 million. That is very, very substantial. At number 2, we've got South Africa, where it indicated that 108.6 million cellular mobile connections were made in South Africa at the start of 2022, which is equivalent to 179.8% of its population. I mean, that's just insane. The internet penetration, on the other hand, only stood at 68.2%, with over 89 million smartphone users. So that tells you that even though the smartphone users are there, the internet penetration is still not making its way as it could. And the reasons behind that being connection, there isn't 3G coverage in all the areas, coupled with, once again, the high data costs. Kenya came in at number 4. They stood at 64.9 million, which was a drop actually for them from 65.1 million subscriptions that were recorded at the end of 2021. So they reckon that the subscriptions, the decline in the SIM subscriptions was partly attributed to the ongoing SIM registration exercise, during which a number of SIMs were deactivated. So it doesn't really appear that they actually lost subscribers, but it must have been a clearing up process which saw a drop and quite a significant decline in the rates. So if we consider how we are going to overcome these hurdles, it's really important to have a look at the satellite coverage over Africa and to consider that it might possibly be one of the best ways to reach into rural areas, into areas that are so remote that terrestrial coverage will still take a good number of years to reach there. But not only that, mobile coverage is possibly already there, maybe on its way there. If it hasn't arrived yet, it could possibly be deployed soon. As we know, cell phone towers are being deployed daily all over the globe, particularly in Africa. There's a huge drive to increase 4G and 5G networks. It's what's happening now. But then we still have the data costs. How do we overcome the data costs? That is going to be a question that everybody is going to ask, because there is no way that we can actually get past that. And the only way, in my opinion, is if we got mobile operators to start working closely with broadcasters to offer streaming services to their subscribers and find alternate methods to generate revenue, such as ad insertions, which could assist in lowering data costs to a lot of its consumers. Now, we've seen that ad insertions have really taken quite a significant increase in a lot of our paid broadcasters' platforms. For them to monetize and actually create revenue, they have been able to give a lot of free content by using ad insertion and generate revenue by targeting ads into the market and basically deliver content at a zero-rated cost, which has had quite a good effect on consumers because they are, everyone's quite happy to watch a 10 or 20-second ad at the beginning of the movie, and then you're getting the movie for free. It just makes sense. The consumer is happy, the broadcaster is happy, the mobile operator is happy because they are still getting the traction on their network and possibly at a fraction of the cost that they would have paid, but they can introduce other revenue models to lower the data standards. Sorry, I seem to be missing one of my slides here. Just touching on Liquid's terrestrial network, if you have a look at this map, you'll see that the terrestrial penetration in Africa that we have is pretty significant, and it basically touches in most of the countries within Africa. So this is great. Yes, we have data centers all over. We have our satellite teleports in most of the African countries. We're actually busy looking at building one in Nigeria at the moment as well, so we'll be able to offer uplink and downlink services out of there as well. And where we don't have our own, we partner with the satellite operators to use their platforms. So we have reach in all these countries. Yes, the major cities. Once again, going out into rural communities, the terrestrial network doesn't expand that far. Once you need to take fiber into rural areas, there's just so many considerations and behind the scenes and financial costs that need to happen, because if the fiber's in the city, there's trenching that needs to happen, you need to involve contractors, you need to get permissions, you need to get local partners, and it's just a lengthy, very costly procedure. All of this can be eliminated to reach these rural areas by using the satellite networks and leveraging off the beautiful coverage that we have over the African continent. Satellite really is the way forward. So I'd like to thank you now all for allowing me to share my views, and I look forward to working with our partners to ensure that we reach even the most remote areas in Africa and make services affordable and available to everyone. Thank you.
Right. That was a very, very interesting presentation from Miriam. Can we please give Miriam another round of applause? Pathways have been shown on how we can move forward with getting content into faces of, or into our audiences across Africa. And one of the things that Miriam has shown us is we have options. And these options, we can take them. So thank you very much. Now, we are due to go to another panel, but I've had this conversation with the DG, our host DG, and it suggested that we should actually take a break, go for lunch. Yeah? Yeah, I know, Sheikh. We will come back and do the panel just after lunch, Sheikh, just around about 2:15. So if we're all in agreement, please, let's go get some lunch. When we come back, we look at the panel that looks at how we provide public service broadcasting going from A to Z. We also look at the issue of infrastructure for content delivery. And we go also more into the issue of local content and channels and programs and how we would deliver it to our audiences. And also we talk about radio. So without much ado, I wish you guys a wonderful lunch. I'll see you back here because lunch has to be just short of an hour. Let's come back here, ladies and gentlemen. Shall we come back here at about 2:30? Is that correct, DG? Yeah? 2:30, just 1 hour, okay? Thank you. Have a good lunch. I'll see you back in an hour. Thank you.